Okay, guys, please don't forget to turn your cameras on. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So, first thing, we are working on the writing section. Last week we worked on the first task of the writing section, right? The integrated writing. I assigned you an essay for you to write. Probably did it already. I haven't checked yet the essays, but I'm gonna do it tonight. So it'll be on your mails probably tomorrow morning, tomorrow noon. And today we're gonna be moving on to the next part of the writing. Remember, we said in the writing sections, we have two different questions. We did the integrated, where you have to read an article, listen to the lecture, and everything we did. And today we're gonna work on the independent writing, okay? Do you guys have any questions before we start? So the independent writing, remember that it doesn't depend on anything. So here you won't have to read anything, you won't have to listen to anything. I would say, in my personal opinion, that it's easier than the previous one we did. Because, I mean, it's completely up to you what you write, right? The questions are simple. They're not gonna be, you won't have any complicated topics as you probably did in the integrated one. So in this case, I mean, the questions are simple and it's completely up to you how you write your essay, right? So what vocabulary you use, it's up to you. You don't have to use any words that you are not aware of. It's up to you what ideas you use, what examples you use. Everything depends on you, okay? So it's a good thing that we have this because it allows you to use the tools you have, right? So you can demonstrate and do the best you can with the tools you have to show your knowledge. So what will you have to do for this question? Pretty simple. They will ask you a question. It's gonna be a closed question about a familiar topic. And you will have to answer this question writing an essay about it in 30 minutes, so half an hour. Okay, so you have a question, you get the question, you read it, and then they will give you 30 minutes for you to write your response. Is that okay so far? Do you guys have any questions about that? Okay. Now, when I say a familiar topic, what I actually mean is something that you could have in like an everyday conversation with a friend. So these are not technical things, right? These are not academic things. So when I say familiar topics, I mean topics like this, education. So maybe they'll ask you about your opinion on, I don't know, like students and homeschooling, or maybe what you think about things related to university life, maybe things that related to the courses that students take at university, things like that. They ask you questions about lifestyle too. So these are things related to health, to working out, to being in shape, to diets, to preferences in terms of like tastes and preferences in terms of like traveling and maybe recreation. So those are lifestyle. And finally, another big one is work, which is related to work life, right? So things that are related to your career, to having a degree, to the workplace, to the relationship with colleagues, that sort of thing. Work decisions, work environments. And those are the most common topics you can have, but they're not the only ones. Sometimes you get questions about technology and its impact, finance decisions, simple finance decisions, so things like saving money or spending money too fast, or like that type of thing. Usually I haven't seen much of finance. And the environment, which is usually related to like actions to prevent or to take action on the environmental problems. So those are usually the topics you have. They're not complicated, you'll see. And it depends on what you want to write about, right? Because you can write simple ideas, or maybe you can write complex. Any questions so far before we move on? Yes. So I was telling you it'll be a closed question. Does anybody know what a closed? It's also called yes/no question. So do you guys know what a closed or an open question is? Does anyone know?
A close question, you have only two answers, yes or no. Agree, disagree.
Exactly. And an open question?
Many reasons.
Yeah, great. Many possible answers, right? So for example, if I asked you, do you prefer pizza or hamburgers? How many possible answers do you have for that question? If I asked you that, pizza or hamburgers, how many options do you have?
Two options.
Exactly. You only have two, right? So you either say, well, I prefer pizza or I prefer hamburgers. But I know that some of you guys are thinking, maybe some of you guys don't like either of them and are like, well, I don't like either of them. Or maybe I think it depends on the situation. It depends on like my cravings, or maybe you like both. You like both equally the same. So I know that those are options too, right? But grammatically speaking, when they ask you, do you prefer pizza or hamburgers? Grammatically speaking, you only have two options, right? Either one or the other, either A or B. That is the type of questions that you have here, closed questions. So for example, these are the most common types of questions. The first one is the agree or disagree. So for example, you say, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Online education is better than the traditional. How many options do you have and what are those in this question?
Agree or disagree.
Exactly. You only have two options, right? So first option is, let's say that you agree. Then in that case, you would be saying that you think that online is better, right? Online education is better. But if you were to disagree and you said that disagree, that means that you don't think that online is better, right? Online is not better. So probably the traditional education is probably better than online for you. So those are the only two possible answers. And I want to be clear about that. For this question and for any independent questions in the speaking or writing, you only have two or three options at most. But in this case, you only have two. And what you have to do is answer or go in for one of the sides. And you have to either strongly agree, so you strongly prefer online education, or strongly disagree, so you don't like online education. It's one or the other. There's no middle ground in this question. Okay, so you strongly agree or strongly disagree. You need to go for the extremes. You can never say when you're answering this question that it depends, that you don't know, that you like both, that you don't think either of them is good. You have to either strongly agree or strongly disagree. And it's going to be the same for the other types. So for instance, the second type says, if I tell you some people prefer to have online education, whether others prefer, I don't know, the traditional one. Which one do you prefer? You only have two options again. So you could prefer online education or face-to-face courses. There's no other option. Now there's another type of question where you can have more than two, but three is the maximum. So in this case, for example, I can tell you which of the following options do you think is more effective for learning? Online education face-to-face courses, or maybe a mix of both. So in that case, they are giving you 3 options, so you have one more. But again, you have to choose one of the 3. You can never be in between 2 of them, or maybe compare and contrast your options. You cannot do that in this course, right? Is that okay so far? Any questions? Okay, guys. So without further ado, let's just start writing our essay. And we're gonna see as we go. David, could you please read this question?
Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Sometimes it's better to be dishonest with people than to always tell them the truth. Use a specific reason and detail to support your answer.
Great, thanks. So this is an agree or disagree type. You have 2 options. You can say that you agree or you can say that you disagree. So let's write them down. First option is say, I strongly agree. And in that case, you'd be saying that sometimes it is better to be dishonest. Or you can have option 2 that says, I strongly disagree, which means that it is not always better to be dishonest, right? It's never better to be dishonest. Those are the only 2 options. Now, when you guys are deciding, the first thing that you have to do after you get this question, remember, you will hear the question, you will read it, and you will have how many minutes to write the essay?
30.
Exactly. You will get a clock with your 30 minutes on it. You will start counting down. So you will start with 30 minutes exactly. And it's gonna go counting down. Then you'll have 29 and 59 seconds, 29 and 58. So you'll get the clock so you can measure your time. Now, during the first 3 minutes, when the clock starts running, you will have to outline your essay, okay? So what do I mean with outline your essay? Basically, you just have to do like a brainstorm. You have to think about what option you'll choose and what arguments you'll use to support that option. Now, when deciding which one to go for, you shouldn't be considering your real thoughts, okay? Don't consider like what's the best option, because there's no best option. You need to think about the easiest option. You need to think about the easiest answer, the one that you can think of more reasons or more examples, the one that's easier to illustrate, to exemplify, to develop. So what would you guys choose? Do we choose option 1 or 2? What's easier to justify?
The second option.
Good, right? So let's go for the second. So first thing you do, you make up your mind, you choose one option. And second, you need to think of 2 reasons why somebody would feel that way. So tell me, or give me 2 reasons why it's never better to be dishonest. What's gonna be your first reason? Any ideas?
You don't have to think another lie to the person.
Okay, yes, good idea. So when you tell the truth, you don't have to be making up stories, right? You don't have to be thinking of what lie to tell. Maybe we could say that, all right? Can we think of another reason?
Maybe it can damage the personality.
Okay, so telling a lie can damage your personality. You sure? How can it damage your personality? Okay, let's think of more reasons to have more options. Can you guys think of another reason? Why is it always better to be honest? Can you think of another reason, maybe?
It can be a lack of values.
Okay, that's good too. But I think that that's maybe that's hard to explain, right? When we talk about values and morals and religion, it's usually hard to explain. I don't know if we should go for that.
If you lie, if you are dishonest, people don't trust in you.
Okay, yes, I like that one. So I think that has to do with being reliable, right, as a persona. So building trust. So if you lie too much, then who is gonna believe you up? Maybe another reason could be when you lie, your relationships are affected, right? So like people don't like lies, so maybe it affects relationships. And I don't necessarily mean like romantic relationships. I'm talking about friendships, relationships with family members. I think it is connected to reason 3 though, right? Being reliable as a person and having good relationships. I think it's connected. Okay, but we did a brainstorming of ideas. Now we have 4 reasons here, but we only need 2. So you gotta choose the 2 ones that you consider are easier to explain, that you can think of maybe more details to give. So the best way to do this is by trying to imagine a situation in which you can illustrate this. So can you illustrate the first reason with an example? So can you think of a situation when you tell the truth so you don't have to think of lies? Can you think about a situation when telling a lie is gonna damage your personality? Can you think of a situation when telling the truth makes you more reliable and it helps you building trust with other people? Or can you think of a situation in which not being honest affects relationships? So which options, you have to choose 2 out of these 4 that we have. Which 2 are the best ones that we can use? What do you guys think?
Number 2 and number 4.
Okay, let's go for those ones then. Now, one thing that you have to consider when thinking of your reasons is that they need to be completely and entirely different from each other. So if the first one is about damaging your personality, the second one cannot be something similar. Maybe in the second one you were thinking, so telling lies or not being honest makes you a bad person, okay? Maybe that could be another reason, but that's too similar to reason 2. So you cannot use reasons that are similar to each other. They have to be entirely different. And that's why you're doing this outline, to see if they can actually be used. Because if they're too similar, then you will, at the end of the day, go in circles. You go over the same idea many times and you'll be redundant, which is something you want to avoid. So do the outline, think about your reasons, think about how you're going to explain and justify those reasons, and choose the best ones. Okay? I think in this case, both are different, so we can use them. Is that okay? Do you guys have any questions about this? This is just, yeah. Oh. So how do we actually write yes? Here's the template. Remember what I always say about templates. You can change the words, but you cannot change the structure or the elements. So for this essay, you need 4 paragraphs. You need an introduction as your first paragraph. You need 2 body paragraphs. One where you explain reason 1, the other where you explain reason 2, and this is the body. And you need a conclusion, right? That's gonna be the structure of your essay. An introduction, 2 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. Is that okay so far? Any questions? Right then, let's start with the introduction. So, in your introduction, you're gonna need to have 3 basic sentences. This is for a basic introduction. 3 sentences, all right? The first one will be some context, where you're gonna talk about the topic in general without going into any details or going into the opinions. The second, when you will directly answer the question or give your opinion, right? Directly. And the third sentence, which is going to be a transition sentence that you just have to memorize. Now, these are the 3 basic elements that any introduction should have. You can have more. I'm not saying that you can. And actually, I'm going to give you another sentence to add as a tip later if you want to make it better. But that's only going to be at the end when you're completely done writing the essay. Initially, we're just going to work with these 3 sentences. Okay, initially. So how do we do this? In the first sentence, we say that you have to have some context. So you need to tell me about the topic in general. We can use this phrase, it's really useful. So you guys can tell me, most people would agree that certain thing is of paramount importance for or when another thing. So here you need to tell me something about the topic that is not related to any of the opinions. So you can never, and that's a big mistake, don't start giving your opinion. Don't tell me most people would agree that it's always better to be honest, because that's your opinion, right? You're gonna say that later. In the beginning, you just need to tell me something in general that almost everyone would agree with, related to the topic and without getting into the opinions. So what is the topic of this question? What is the topic of our essay? What would you guys say?
Tell the truth or be dishonest.
Okay, but those are 2 things. We just need one keyword.
Honestly.
Honesty. That's the topic, right? Honesty, the truth. Maybe we can go further and say values, principles. That's the topic, right? We're talking about values, we're talking about principles, we're talking about honesty and the truth. That's the topic of this essay. So you need to tell me something about that in the first sentence. Can you guys think of any ideas? So for example, maybe you could say, most people would agree that defining one's principles is of paramount importance, which basically means is important for, I don't know, for the development of any human being. I don't know if development is good, maybe another word would be better. But basically, what I want you to see in this sentence is that I'm talking about principles in general, right? I'm saying that it's important to know what your principles are. I'm not saying whether it's better to be dishonest or not, right? I'm not saying that if somebody should be dishonest sometimes or somebody should tell the truth all the time. I'm not getting there yet. I'm just telling that it's important to know your principles, right? That's it. That's everything I'm saying here. Right? I'm talking about the topic principles in general without getting into the opinion. Is that okay so far? Do you have any questions about the first sentence? Guys?
No, no.
Now the second sentence is the one where now you're going to have to give your own opinion. So now you're going to have to answer the question as directly as you can. Now you go back to the question. The question was, do you agree or disagree that it's better to be dishonest with people than to always tell them the truth? Our answer, copying and pasting would be, I disagree. I think that it is never better to be dishonest with people than to always tell them. Right? That is our answer. And I'm using the same words as we have in the question. So what you guys have to do is you need to paraphrase this without losing its meaning. And that's another big mistake students make. They want to make this so complicated, so fancy, use some like complex words that they end up losing the meaning and they don't say the same. So you need to make sure that you're saying the same. And if you feel that there's no other way to say it, it's okay if you use the same words. What matters the most is that you are expressing the same idea. So how can we say this? It's not this part, right? How can we say that it is never better to be dishonest than to always tell them the truth? How can we paraphrase that? Ideas? How can we say that? Nobody?
That is important. Tell what you think in a good way.
Okay. Are you really saying the same, bro? You're saying it's important to say what you're thinking in a good way. But the question wasn't, do you think that it's important to say what you're saying in a good way? The question was, do you think that it's always better to tell the truth or it's better to be dishonest sometimes? It's not the same. Perfect.
That be honest is important.
Okay. That's good, but the question again is not if it's important or not. Is it always better to be honest, or is it better to sometimes be? You could say, I'm convinced that no matter the circumstance, so that means always, right? No matter the circumstance, it will always be better. I don't want to say better, be preferable, but better to be honest, right? Or to tell the truth. I don't know what the question said.
Tell the truth.
Okay, so let's say to be honest. Right? So we can say that, or we can say I'm convinced that no matter the circumstance, it is never or it will never be preferable to be dishonest, right? So what I'm saying is the same. So no matter the circumstance, it's like no matter what's happening, you should always, it's always better, it's always preferable to be honest, right? To tell the truth. Saying the same, I'm not changing the meaning. Is that okay? Remember, don't spend too much time here. At the end of the day, the biggest tip I can give you, and what I was struggling with personally too, is sometimes you focus too much on making perfect sentences, perfect paragraphs, that you don't complete the essay. You run out of time. And I know that 30 minutes seems long, but it's not when you're here. So in the beginning, you should just write. Even if it's not perfect, even if you're repeating the words, even if you cannot find the correct words, even if you have to copy and paste, in the beginning, you have to write. You cannot get stuck. Don't spend more than 1 minute thinking of a sentence. If you're spending too much time, then maybe leave that sentence or write it down in simple ideas, simple words, but don't get stuck, okay? It's better to have a complete essay that is not perfect, but is complete, than having a perfect paragraph, okay? Don't run out of time. And that's it. Those are the two first sentences. And finally, we need this transition sentence that you can memorize, where we're gonna say, I hold this opinion for 2 reasons, which will be addressed in the following paragraphs. Now, one important thing to mention here is that you can never mention the reasons yet. In your introduction, you cannot talk about any of the reasons you thought about. Don't summarize it. I've seen a lot of students summarizing the reasons here. It's a waste of time because you will summarize them in the conclusion and you will mention them in the body. So mentioning again is just gonna make you repeat the words, be redundant, and waste time. So just use something like this, a phrase like that. Is that okay? That's your introduction. That's it. 3 sentences, context about the topic, opinion, and transition. Is that okay so far? Any questions about the intro? Okay, guys.
No questions, teacher.
Thank you. We're gonna put this here. Okay, guys. So the next thing are the body paragraphs. Now you have to go for the body and talk about your reasons in the body paragraphs. So each body paragraph will be different. Okay, I won't tell you they're gonna be the same. It's not like they integrated. So in the first body paragraph, you need 4 things. The first one is gonna be the reason, of course. So it has to be direct and it has to be obvious what the connection between the reason and the opinion is. The topic. Then you need a further explanation of the reason. So here you need to narrow it down a little bit. The reason is supposed to be broad, right? It's supposed to be general. And in your further explanation, you're supposed to narrow it down a little bit. So it's going to be more specific. And here you need to think about how, why, when, where, in which circumstances, which situations, what extent. You can answer those questions. I'm going to tell you how later. Then you need an example, preferably a personal one. This is supposed to be 2 to 4 sentences. And finally, you need a closing idea. Right? Those are the 4 things that you guys need in your body paragraph. In your first body paragraph. We're gonna see what those are. Okay, thank you. Okay, guys. So let's see, let's do it. The first sentence has to be your reason, and it has to be, we said, direct, and it has to be clearly connected to your opinion and to the topic. So let's see. You need to use a transition before giving the reason. Okay, it has to have a transition. So we're gonna say to start, to begin with, first of all, firstly, first, whichever transition you prefer. But basically you need to tell me your reason. And when I say direct, I'm telling you not to complicate it too much. Because I've seen some students who try to like add complex ideas in the reasons, and they are difficult to understand. This essay should be easy for the reader to read. Okay, the fact that it's easy and it's simple doesn't mean that it's not good. I would say that it's even better when you make it simple. So in a reason, we thought about relationships, for example, right? We said that that telling lies or not being honest affects your relationships, right? So I don't know, what can we say? How can we phrase that for our reason? Any ideas?
Maybe to start, practice honesty is a good way to improve your lifetime.
Okay, good. But we're talking about lifestyle, right? And we're saying relationships. Maybe.
Relationships. Practice honesty is a good way to improve your relationships.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, you can say relationship. Okay, that's our reason, right? Now, careful with the grammar. Here we have a mistake because of the gerund. Remember that. Can you guys see the mistake? Can you see the error?
To practice.
To practice?
No.
Sure. How can we correct this sentence?
Practicing honesty.
Practicing. So what happens is this is a gerund. In this sentence, what are we talking about in this sentence? What is the subject of this sentence? What are we talking about?
Practicing honesty.
Exactly. Practicing honesty is the subject. What is the verb?
Is.
So practicing honesty, we're saying is the subject, and is the verb. And what comes after the verb is the complement. Well, we have the object. Many things you can have there, right? We're gonna say it's the predicate or the complement. But the most important thing for you to identify is subject and verb. Now, what happens is, since in this sentence the verb is, and practicing honesty is the subject, when you say practice, you're saying it like if it were a verb. But in this sentence, practicing honesty is the subject. So I know that to practice is actually a verb, right? I know that. It's a verb. But in this sentence specifically, we are not using practice as a verb. We are using it as a noun. We're using it as the subject of our sentence. We are talking about that. So when you use a verb in the place of a noun, so as a subject, as the subject of your sentence, it has to have ing, right? So it becomes practicing instead of practice. Because if you just say practice, it looks like a verb, but it's not a verb. Here is a noun, okay? Practice not. Is that okay? Good. So practicing honesty is a good way to improve your relationships. Great, awesome. That is our first sentence. That is our reason, right? We're focusing on relationships only. Now, the second sentence should be you explaining this a little bit more. So you need to ask yourself, so how? How is it that practicing honesty helps you improve your relationships? Like, in what way? How, right? Like, what is it that honesty has that makes relationships better? Or why? So why is it that honesty is a good thing for relationships? Maybe is it because they build trust? Maybe because you become more reliable, right? I think that it was related to what Alejandro was saying. We could say when. Maybe we can talk about one specific time. Maybe we can talk about when you are building a relationship, maybe in the beginning of a relationship, right? We're coming down to one specific time. Maybe we can talk about where. So maybe we can narrow it down to the professional area, right? So maybe in a professional way, professional relationships, right? Maybe in the workplace. Or maybe we're talking about family members. So maybe at home. In which situations, right? Maybe we can talk about like situations where where honesty improves your relationships, right? I don't know, maybe when you don't know the person yet. To what extent, right? Is this always like that? Is it sometimes? In which cases does this happen? So these are questions you can ask yourself so that you can explain this a little bit more. This is really important because this is the criteria that the TOEFL uses, that the ETS uses to score your responses. Now, the criteria they use for the independent writing, one of them is your response is well organized and well developed, right? It has clearly appropriate explanations, exemplifications, and details. So one of the criteria they use is how well developed and how well supported your ideas are, which you could say relates to the depth of your essay. So how deep do you explore the ideas? Are they just superficial or are you going more in depth? So even though they don't really measure or evaluate your essay based on the length, on how long it is, they do evaluate based on the depth, on how much you explain and how explained they are, right? So it's important that you try to go farther always when you're telling something, right? So let's add one more sentence. You can use a transition. It depends on what you want to say, right? It depends on what specific thing you say in the next sentence, but one that you can always use, or at least most of the time, is in fact. So what are we going to say next? What can we say? What's going to be our second sentence where we explain a little bit more? Ideas?
When you want to know a person, you have to be honest.
Okay, when you want to know a person, you have to be honest. Okay, maybe. Something else. Why? Maybe here we can use what you said. I really like what you said about building trust, right? So that other people can trust you and you become a reliable person so people will believe in what you say. Something like that. Let's say when you
tell the truth, it makes you a trustworthy person.
Okay, when you tell the truth, it makes you a trustable person, right? Is that?
Yes.
Okay, I like that. So in fact, maybe you can say by telling the truth, you become a trustable person. Great, I like that. So instead of saying when, and this is a tip, it is very common to use conditional sentences and to use when. I don't know why, like I've seen it in many essays. Like when you tell the truth, you improve your relationships. If you tell the truth, you improve your relationships. When you tell the truth, you become a trustable person. So one way to, like one alternative for that would be using by. So by telling the truth, you become a trustable person. That sounds better, right? So by telling the truth, you become a trustable person, right? And people will believe in what you say, right? I like it. Is that okay? Do you guys want to add something maybe? Change something? No. Good. So that's sentence 2, right? Now, finally, we need to get to the example. So one thing I want to say here, in the first body paragraph, your example, that when I say example, what I really mean is evidence, okay? So you need to prove this. Now, the best way to present evidence for this type of essay is always with examples, okay? That's why in the document I just showed you, it said exemplifications, right? In or details. So you need to give an example where you illustrate what you're just saying. So you need to tell me the same, but using an example. Your example should be about 60% of your paragraph, all right? So it should be the longest part of your paragraph. Your example cannot be short because it needs to have different elements and it needs to have enough details, all right? It needs to have appropriate details. So start getting used to the idea that your example cannot be short. Okay? It has to be 2 to 4 sentences long. Now, as for the example, this is, the thing is, I cannot tell you what exactly to do there because it depends. And I think I've said this for those of you who were in the independent speaking, it's the same here. So when you give examples, ideally, the best type of example you can give here is a personal experience. All right. So in your example, you can tell me about a time when this happened to you, when you told the truth, when you were honest with somebody, and that made you a trustable person, and the other person trusted you, right? The other person relied on you, and that improved your relationship. That is the best type of example that you can give, a personal experience when this happened to you. Now, a single experience, right? Something that happened to you in the past. Now, what happens is, if you guys are not too comfortable in using other tenses yet, so if you feel or if you tend to make more grammar mistakes when using other tenses, then don't go with a personal example. Okay, it depends. If you're comfortable using other tenses, your best option is to give a personal experience. But if you're not, if you tend to make mistakes with conjugating the tenses, then it's better that you don't, because it's always better to have something simple than to have something incorrectly done. Okay, so I don't know if that idea is okay. Again, if you tend to make mistakes when conjugating verbs in past tenses, so if you forget to conjugate verbs in the past, or you don't know, you don't have the vocabulary yet, then don't go with a personal experience. You can go with something general in the present. But if you're okay with that, the best thing you can do is go with a personal experience. Okay? Does that make sense? Do you guys have questions about that? Nope. Okay. So we will see. You know, I assigned you an essay. You probably sent it to me. The deadline was today. I haven't checked yet, but I'm gonna do it today and tomorrow morning. So I promise that you'll get your essays. You'll get the emails with the feedback and everything by tomorrow noon. And I'll assign you another one for this one. So that I know exactly where you are, and I'll give you the tips there. So if you're struggling with something, then I'll tell you what to do for the exam. But for now, we're gonna work with a personal experience. Okay, we're gonna use that as an example. I don't know if we have enough time today though, to do it, because it's interesting what we have to do. Here, the example has to be closely connected to your second sentence. It has to be a perfect illustration of what you mentioned in the second sentence. So you need to tell me about a time where you told the truth and you became a trustable person, or about a time when you didn't tell the truth and you became somebody that's not trustable, right? And the closing idea has to be directly connected to the first sentence. So at the end, you need to summarize how this experience improved or maybe broke your relationship with someone. So it's interesting the structure you have to follow. And the example has to have certain things. So in your example, you're going to have to give some context, explain when and where. You're going to have to tell me the events, so explain what happened. And this is what needs to be related to the second sentence. And it needs to have a resolution too. Okay, so it is, I mean, I think we need more time to go for the example. Okay, we're gonna probably continue tomorrow, writing down the example and finishing the essay. We have this entire week to work on this, work on the writing, so it won't be a problem. We have enough time to practice. But so far, I mean, as to regarding what we've done today, we finished the second sentence, right? Up until the second sentence for the body part. Do you guys have any questions? Do you guys have any comments? Is everything clear about what we did today?
Yes, it's clear.
Yes. We'll continue tomorrow. We'll work on the same essay. I'm not gonna touch anything. And we'll work on the example. I will work on the example, closing idea, and second body paragraph is easier. It's shorter. No questions there before we go?
No questions.
Okay, so please don't forget to fill out today's survey before you leave. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thank you, teacher. Bye.
Thank you,
Teacher.
teacher.
Thank you, teacher.
Thank you, teacher. Bye.